I'm Jessica, a 35-year-old office worker. My husband, Bob, is 2 years younger than me, and due to his job transfer, we've been temporarily living with his parents. I emphasize temporary because I can't wait to move out and get our own place. Bob, on the other hand, seems to enjoy being back in his childhood home. It's nostalgic for him, familiar, comfortable. But for me, it's nothing short of a nightmare. The reason? My in-laws, especially my mother-in-law, whom I've never gotten along with. Even before Bob and I got married, she was difficult to deal with. But now that we're under the same roof, her attitude has only worsened. Jessica, haven't you gone shopping yet? You missed the supermarket's early bird sale. You can't even shop efficiently, she scolds me as if I'm some incompetent housewife. I work from home with my company's permission, but I still have a full-time job. There's no way I can make it to the supermarket's early bird sale during work hours. Mother-in-law, as I've said many times, I work during the day. I can't go shopping until after 5 p.m., I reply as calmly as possible. But she just scoffs. So arrogant. Can't even have a child. Her words sting. Bob and I don't have children, not because we don't want them, but because we simply can't afford fertility treatments. We haven't gone to the hospital for tests, so we don't even know the reason. But that doesn't stop her from making cruel remarks whenever she gets the chance. If my mother-in-law is verbally abusive, my father-in-law is condescending in a different way. He has this outdated belief that any woman over 30 is an old lady. And since I'm 35, he treats me like I'm ancient. Hey, old lady, get me the ashtray. Why are you wearing a skirt? No one wants to see your legs. I want to snap back. If I'm an old lady at 35, what does that make you at 60? But I bite my tongue barely. I'm not one to take insults lying down. I clap back whenever they throw shade at me, but it only makes things worse. To them, my responses are disrespectful and bossy. The tension in the house is unbearable, and every day feels suffocating. I had hoped that Bob and I could start looking for our own place soon, but ever since his transfer, he's been busier than ever. Jessica, I have another business trip this weekend. Again? You just got back from one. This new branch sure sends you on a lot of business trips. Before the transfer, Bob rarely worked weekends, let alone traveled for work. Now he's constantly gone. Can't be helped, he shrugs. Work changes with the workplace. I understand that job demands vary, but this feels excessive. It's almost as if he's avoiding being home. And as a result, we haven't had a single moment to look for a new place. What was supposed to be a temporary arrangement now feels endless. I'm trapped in a house filled with resentment, insults, and loneliness. Bob might be fine living here, but I'm not. And if things don't change soon, I might have to make a difficult choice, one that doesn't include waiting around for Bob to decide when he's ready to move. I had always feared the worst. What if we ended up living with my in-laws indefinitely? The thought was unbearable. But before I could even fully process that nightmare, something happened that changed everything. One evening, as I was unpacking Bob's suitcase after another so-called business trip, I stumbled upon a piece of paper in his bag's pocket. It was a printout from an online travel website. At first, I thought nothing of it, just another flight and hotel reservation for his work. But as I scanned the details more closely, my stomach dropped. The booking wasn't just for a flight and a hotel. It included tickets to Disneyland for 2 people. And the reservation was for yesterday, the very day Bob was supposedly on his business trip. My mind raced. Bob's company had nothing to do with Disneyland. They dealt in seafood, and unless they were suddenly selling shrimp-shaped Mickey ears, this made no sense. There was only one logical conclusion. Bob had lied. As I stood there, stunned and shaking, I suddenly heard Bob humming in the shower. It's a small world after all. The tune rang through the bathroom door, eerily cheerful, as if he were reminiscing about his wonderful Disneyland trip, the one he took while lying to me. My blood boiled. The nerve of him! Just as I was about to storm into the bathroom and confront him, his phone suddenly rang. Still blinded by rage, I grabbed it and answered without thinking. "Hello," I said sharply. There was silence. Then, a young woman's voice hesitantly said, Uh, before abruptly hanging up. That was it. I knew. The woman on the other end of the line was his mistress. And she panicked the moment she realized I had answered instead of Bob. Fueled by anger, I decided to dig deeper. I picked up Bob's phone. He wasn't exactly a genius with security. No fingerprint lock, no Face ID, just a 4-digit passcode. And knowing Bob, I had a pretty good guess. His birthday. Bingo. The phone unlocked instantly. But the moment I opened his photos, I felt sick. Picture after picture of Bob, smiling, laughing, wrapped around a young woman. The timestamps on the photos? All from his supposed business trips. And then I checked his messages. There, in his WhatsApp chats, I found a name, Melissa Smith. I clicked. Bob, I love you. I want to be your wife soon. Wife. Melissa wasn't just some fling. She thought she was going to marry him. Just then, Bob walked out of the bathroom, towel drying his hair. That's refreshing, he sighed. I turned to face him, gripping his phone tightly. My voice was calm, but deadly. Feeling refreshed, huh? In more ways than one, I bet. Bob froze. Huh. Who is Melissa Smith? I asked, my voice sharp as a knife. His face drained of color. He stammered. Gotcha. So it's true. You've been lying about business trips. Instead, you've been taking vacations with Melissa Smith. Were all your trips just lies? Bob was caught. He knew it. How did you? He mumbled. I held up his phone. All the proof is right here. That's when he snapped. Hey, you went through my phone? That's a violation of my privacy. I laughed out loud. This man had the audacity to whine about privacy when he had been cheating on me for months? If you didn't want to get caught, maybe you should have set a better password. Before we got married, Bob had made a promise. No cheating. Ever. I had made my stance clear. If he ever betrayed me, I'd leave immediately. No second chances. My voice was firm. Let's get a divorce. To my shock, Bob barely reacted. Yeah, I guess so. That was it. No fight. No begging. Just acceptance. I had expected denials, excuses, even anger, but instead, Bob just nodded, as if he had already decided. I'll get the divorce papers tomorrow, I said coldly. You tell your parents. Bob simply shrugged. It was almost like he had been waiting for this moment. The next day, I left early in the morning to pick up divorce papers from the city office. By the time I returned home, it was late at night. As soon as I stepped inside, my mother-in-law pounced. So, you finally decided to come back? We were wondering how long you were going to wander around, she sneered. Bob stood beside her, arms crossed. My father-in-law sat in his chair, watching silently. I narrowed my eyes. Bob had clearly told them everything. But instead of apologizing for raising a cheating son, my mother-in-law's first instinct was to insult me. I had no patience left. Is that really the first thing you have to say? I asked. Not an apology? Not a single word about your son lying and cheating. But my mother-in-law's next words? They were even worse than I expected. I stood frozen. Had I heard that correctly? Unbelievable. My mother-in-law scoffed. Well, it doesn't matter. At least you're finally leaving. We don't want to see your face anymore, so it's just as well. Her voice dripped with satisfaction, as if she had won some twisted game. I clenched my fists. What do you mean? I asked sharply. My mother-in-law smirked. It was the kind of self-satisfied, smug expression that made my stomach churn. Exactly as I said, she continued. I was sick and tired of seeing your face. Finally, Bob has come to his senses, and you were just in the way. You're always back-talking, never showing an ounce of charm. Even when I tried to make you uncomfortable enough to leave, you just wouldn't take the hint. I felt my blood pressure rising. Tried to make me uncomfortable? She gave a mocking laugh. Oh, please. You think I was just being rude for fun? No, dear. I had to force you out. And when my usual methods didn't work, I had to use my ace in the hole. My stomach twisted. Ace in the hole? I had no idea what she meant, but something about the way she said it sent a cold shiver down my spine. And then she smiled. That same satisfied smile Bob had when he thought he could get away with cheating. You already know the name of Bob's girlfriend, don't you? She asked sweetly. My throat felt dry. Melissa Smith, I muttered. Her smile widened. That's right. You see, I have a friend from my book club, Mrs. Smith. Her daughter is such a well-mannered, charming young lady. She's 10 years younger than you, only 25. At that age, she can have kids easily. I felt like I had been punched in the gut. I staggered back, trying to process what she had just said. And then she dropped the bomb. So, I introduced Mrs. Smith's daughter to Bob. I stared at her, my entire body going cold. Excuse me? My voice was barely above a whisper. She beamed at me, completely unfazed. I said, I introduced Bob to her. That's all. Nothing scandalous. My head was spinning. Are you telling me you arranged Bob's affair? She waved a hand dismissively. Oh, arranged sounds so dramatic. I simply made an introduction. What Bob does after that is his decision. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. She had deliberately set her own son up with another woman, while I was still married to him. And she was proud of it. You're actually admitting to this? I asked in disbelief. Of course, she sniffed. What's there to hide? You were never going to give us grandchildren. You work all the time, never bothering to start a family. Meanwhile, Melissa is young, beautiful, and ready to be a mother. Next to her, my father-in-law nodded in agreement. Bob is our only child, he said gruffly. We need an heir. If you weren't going to give us one, then you were useless. That was it. That was all I was to them. A womb. A tool to carry on their precious family name. And since I had failed them, they had no problem replacing me. For a moment, I felt numb. Then something inside me snapped. I laughed. It wasn't a happy laugh. It was the kind of laugh you let out when you finally understand just how twisted people can be. Wow, I said, shaking my head. I always knew you didn't like me, but this is a whole new level of disgusting. My mother-in-law's smug expression faltered. Excuse me, she snapped. I turned to Bob, who had been silent this entire time, probably too much of a coward to say anything. So, let me get this straight, I said, crossing my arms. Your mother picked out a new wife for you, arranged your affair, and you just went along with it? Bob shifted uncomfortably. I mean, Melissa and I just hit it off, and… Oh, save it. I rolled my eyes. You didn't hit it off. You were handed a new girlfriend like a shiny new toy, and you were too spineless to say no. My mother-in-law bristled. Watch your tone, young lady. I snorted. Or what? You'll set Bob up with someone else? Maybe a younger model next time? She opened her mouth to speak, but I cut her off. You know what? I don't even care anymore. You want Melissa? Take her. You want grandchildren? Good luck with that. You think you've won? Congratulations. You've successfully ruined your son's marriage, and now you're stuck with the pathetic excuse of a man who needs his mommy to find him a girlfriend. Bob's face turned red. Hey, that's not. I ignored him. I'm done here. I pulled the divorce papers from my bag and threw them on the table. Sign these, Bob. We're finished. Bob sat stiffly, his eyes darting between me and his parents. But my mother-in-law? She was smug. She truly believed she had won. So, he was aware of his wife's actions, she said, shaking her head. Do you understand now? A 35-year-old woman who can't even have kids is no longer needed. I clenched my jaw. If you understand that, she continued, pointing at me like I was some disposable object, then hurry up and leave. For a moment, I said nothing. Then, I smiled. I see, I said calmly. I understand your views very clearly. Bob relaxed slightly, probably thinking I was finally accepting defeat. I'll leave, I continued, nodding. As you wish. I'll take all my belongings with me. My mother-in-law laughed coldly. Oh, please do, she sneered. Not that you have much to take with you anyway. She folded her arms. Do you need help moving? She grinned, thinking she had broken me. If only she knew. I gave her a knowing smile. No, it's fine.
Don't worry about me.
Everything's already arranged. A flicker of confusion crossed her face.
Huh.
I tilted my head. You seem surprised. What's wrong? Were you expecting me to cry?
To beg.
She narrowed her eyes. That's when I dropped the bomb. Besides, mother-in-law, I already know that you were helping Bob cheat on me. Her smug expression shattered. What? She snapped. Bob stiffened. Wait, what are you? I smirked. What do you think I've been doing all day? Their eyes widened. If I had just gone to City Hall to get divorce papers, it wouldn't have taken this long, I said casually. I spent all day arranging my move and meeting with Melissa Smith. Bob's face drained of color. Oh my God. My mother-in-law jumped from her seat. You met with Melissa? Bob asked, his voice rising in panic. I crossed my arms. What? Did you think I would let you cheat behind my back and not say a word to the other woman? I let out a mocking laugh. I made sure to note down her phone number when I checked her phone yesterday, I said smoothly. Bob's hands clenched into fists. You. I raised an eyebrow.
What?
Upset that I outsmarted you. My mother-in-law looked ready to explode. You actually called her? She shrieked. I smirked. Oh yes. Melissa was really surprised when I introduced myself as Bob's wife. Apparently, you've been lying to her this entire time, Bob. Bob's eyes darted to his parents, his breath coming out shaky. I told her the whole truth, I said, my voice calm and steady.
She knows you're married.
She knows your business trips were just excuses. And she knows that your dear mommy set this whole thing up. My mother-in-law's face turned ghostly pale. And no, she stammered. That girl wouldn't. I grinned. Melissa was furious. I leaned in slightly. And so was Mrs. Smith. My mother-in-law visibly flinched. Mrs. Smith, she echoed. I nodded.
Yes.
Your lovely book club friend was absolutely outraged when she found out you manipulated her daughter into having an affair with a married man. In fact, I let the suspense hang for a moment before dropping the final blow. She's considering suing both you and Bob for marriage fraud. A horrified silence fell over the room. Bob's mouth fell open. My mother-in-law let out a choked gasp. What? You heard me. I shrugged. Melissa's mother isn't just some gossiping book club lady. She has connections. And now, thanks to you, Bob might not just lose his marriage. He might end up facing legal trouble. Bob looked like he was about to pass out. No, she wouldn't, he muttered. Oh, she would, I said with a sweet smile. I even promised to help her. After all, it's only fair. Bob was visibly shaken, his hands trembling as he tried to process everything. His mother? Frozen in shock. His father?
Speechless.
They never expected things to turn against them so quickly. But I wasn't finished yet. Given the many ways in which Melissa deserves sympathy, I continued, I've decided not to claim any compensation from her. Bob let out a small breath of relief. Too soon. Instead, I added with a wicked smile, I'll increase the amount I claim from you, Bob. And from you, mother-in-law. And you too, father-in-law. My father-in-law's head snapped up. Compensation? He barked. Why the hell do we have to pay damages? His voice was laced with panic. It's one thing if it's just Bob, he stammered, but we have nothing to do with this. Oh, the audacity. I let out a small laugh. Oh, you thought you could play your games without facing any consequences. His face twisted. There's no such thing as taking the best part without getting hurt, I continued coolly. But I cut him off. The emotional distress caused by your constant harassment is more than enough reason to demand compensation. Don't you think? Silence. Even my father-in-law couldn't argue with that. And have you forgotten what I do for a living? I leaned forward. I work at a law firm. Why don't I consult with my boss and see just how much we can squeeze out of you? Their faces went white. They knew they were screwed. And that's when a car pulled up in the driveway. My smile widened. Oh, they're here. Bob blinked. Who's here? I turned toward the door, calling out, Hey there. Thanks for coming at such a late time. A group of movers entered the house. "No problem," one of them said. We had a night shift slot open. I gestured for them to begin. "Please go ahead. Be careful. There are some fragile items." They nodded and got to work. The movers moved swiftly, packing up all of my belongings with practiced efficiency. Not just my clothes, books, and laptop, but the appliances in the living room and kitchen as well. Bob and his parents watched in horror as their house was emptied before their eyes. "Wait, hold on," my mother-in-law shrieked. "Those are ours." I turned to her with mock confusion. "Ours," I repeated. "Oh no, you must be mistaken. I brought everything here when Bob and I moved in." My mother-in-law's jaw dropped. She looked around in a panic. "That can't be. These have been here for ages." I smirked. "Actually, no. When Bob and I first moved in because of his job transfer, all of your appliances were old and outdated. I couldn't stand it, so I had our appliances shipped over from our old apartment." Her face contorted in rage. I pointed at each item one by one. "The robotic vacuum?
Mine.
The cordless cleaner? Also mine. The high-end oven range that can do just about anything? Oh, definitely mine." My mother-in-law's hands clenched into fists. You're taking everything, you greedy woman." She lunged at me. But Bob, for once in his life, did something right. He grabbed her arm and held her back. "Mom, it can't be helped," he muttered bitterly. "It's all Jessica's." He had finally accepted reality. But his mother? Not a chance. As the movers carried out the last boxes, I felt lighter than ever. "All right," I told them. "Please make sure everything gets to my new address safely." They bowed before climbing into the truck. Bob stared at me. "Where's that truck going?" he asked hesitantly. I chuckled. "Oh, you know my apartment." His brow furrowed. "Your apartment?" I nodded. "The one I lived in before you were transferred." Bob's face fell. He knew what that meant. I smirked. "It was never sold, you know. The asking price was too high. The realtor kept suggesting I lower it, but I'm glad I didn't." Bob staggered back, looking like he'd been punched. "You," he whispered. I fastened my seatbelt. Honestly, I let out a soft laugh. Maybe, deep down, I always knew this would happen. Bob's knees buckled. And that's when,
Bam.
I was suddenly shoved. I gasped, stumbling as pain shot through my arm. "You!" my mother-in-law screeched, eyes burning with pure hatred. She grabbed a cutting board and hurled it at me. My heart jumped. But before it could hit me, thud, a black blur tackled her midair. She screamed, falling to the ground. I blinked in shock. Blackie. The stray cat I had been feeding near the house stood on top of her, hissing furiously. I stared at him in disbelief. Did he just save me? My mother-in-law flailed beneath him, cursing and screaming. But I just laughed. "Thanks, Blackie," I said, scooping him up. With that, I got into my car, started the engine, and drove away from that nightmare for good. Bob and I officially divorced. The law firm I worked at filed a lawsuit against him and his parents for compensation. The best part? The young lawyers at my office were thrilled to take my case. They did it for almost no fee, just to see justice served. And as for Melissa Smith, a senior lawyer took her case. He planned to file both criminal and civil lawsuits against Bob and his mother. "It's been a long time since I've had a case this exciting," he told me. Even if Bob's family sold their house, they'd still be drowning in debt and poverty for years. I couldn't help but grin. Was I alone now?
Yes.
But compared to living with those toxic in-laws and my cheating husband, this was heaven. As I unpacked in my cozy apartment, Blackie curled up beside me, purring softly. I stroked his fur, chuckling. "You really are my little hero." Tomorrow, I'd buy him some catnip as a reward. Because this was my fresh start, and I was finally free. Please feel free to comment below if you like this. Remember to like and subscribers for more.